by far lesser of two evils. I seriously fear, especially as being somebody under the trans umbrella, the some of the things that Trump has said around for the trans community, and um, terrifies me. I think there's lots of reason to be fearful of him being back in office, and we've already seen such a a mess in regards to women's rights being attacked here in these last few years, and well, again, my gosh, attacked for generations, but the progress being taken away, and so it's like it's scary to me to have somebody in there who just fires such angry and hateful rhetoric all the time.
Well, and apparently JD Vance has said that a woman should stay with an abusive husband if they have children.
Oh my God.
So, I
It,
mean, he's even worse.
I know. And it's so sad. The number of misunderstood, um, or the way people misinterpret, you know, beliefs from their childhood, right? Like, cause I grew up I know we're going to get into it, but a little bit, I grew up very religious, conservative Christian, and so much of the Christian church is misinterpreted. People take these messages from scripture and run with them in ways that are not the way that they were intended from my belief. I've done a lot of study into the history and context of scripture and of who Jesus was, and I don't claim Christianity anymore because I don't think that it's an accurate representation. But I I follow a lot of the messages that I grew up with around unconditional love and being, you know, light in a dark world, all those kinds of things, are messages that are true and aren't unique to Christianity. I mean, these messages exist in all of the world religions, and but people just get so off track, with so many things. I mean, I think one of the worst things that happens is when religion is introduced into a governing body, and once religion and politics intermingle, things collapse. Once you look to religion to be your answer to all questions, you start making some assumptions that I think can lead down dangerous paths.
Because you think that you're right because God is on your side. So
Exactly.
it
Right. I mean,
helps
look at
compromise.
you can look at it. There's so many examples through history, right? Like I'm a big British culture fan, so I find like all the British TV and those kinds of things very very interesting. And looking at the number of all the king dynamics of like I am God's chosen, no I am God's chosen, no I am all everybody believes so strongly in these, and you have people coming up saying they had messages from God. It's so manipulative, and I don't even think that it's always intentional to be manipulative, but the way that the message was presented for so long, people truly believed that, like, you get this little intuition, you get this little aha moment, you have this kind of like thing happen. It's like, well, that has to be God. Like, um, I feel so inspired. Of course, that's from a higher power, and yeah, I mean, it's just sad when you take those things out of context and you don't actually apply them back into a community kind of setting that is intentional on being loving. And again, that unconditional piece is the important part, because a lot of the love that is experienced in this world is transactional.
Right. Well, let's go back to your very beginnings. Where and when were you
Sure.
born?
So I was born in Kansas back in 1985, and grew up, but moved around. My father is a pastor, and so I lived in Kansas, Alabama, Indiana, Michigan, uh, for my childhood years, and then went to college in back in Indiana. I've lived in Chicago, and then Hawaii, San Diego, Northern California, there in Chico. Back now in Indiana, Michigan, and then on to Colorado next.
Um, and what month were you born? I'm interested in your astrological sign.
Sure, I'm a New Year's Eve child, so I was born, yep, December 31st, and
Capricorn.
Capricorn. Yep. My it's the actual. I've done the full chart a few times, and it's one of those. I find it interesting, but it's not been the modality that I feel like has provided the most insight into my personality. So I always keep forgetting. I believe my rising is Gemini, and I feel like I tend to connect a little bit more with some of the Gemini, um, messages. But yeah.
That's what I am.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So say more about what kind of pastor your father was, what the church taught, what they expected of the son of the pastor.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I grew up in a denomination or a subsect of the Christian culture that's called Church of God, and there's a couple different Church of Gods out there. The one that I grew up out of is based out of Anderson, Indiana, and it was a movement of people that were essentially frustrated that there was so much division in the Christian church, and they were trying to create a new, and hopefully was in their mind was a new kind of like maybe unifying movement of getting being kind of like the one that people could follow, because it kind of would bring in everybody. But they're very similar in their beliefs to people following the Wesleyan tradition, Methodist, Presbyterian, very similar traditional Protestant views. But they came out of that very kind of strict right and wrong kind of messages. My the foundation of this belief had very strict rules in regards to you don't play cards because that looks like gambling. You don't drink or smoke. You don't use bad language. You
You don't
um,
dance?
don't dance. Yep. And so all of those things became, even though by the time that I came up, those the don't dance wasn't necessarily the foundational thing, but definitely like smoking and drinking and swearing, and of course certainly no sex, nothing outside of the heteronormative kind of understanding is accepted. And my to my dad's credit, however, my dad is somebody who's been a lifelong learner. He continues to push himself and tries to grow, and has grown a significant amount in his time in ministry. And I think he is now on a path of expressing, and it has always really been love. Love is this essential component. Sorry, dogs are barking out there, and love is the essential component. And sorry, those are very distracting. It's
I
my
don't hear
I'm at
them.
okay, good. Uh, and so that's really become the central point of the message. I mean, for him, Jesus is the most important uh, piece of the puzzle. Without Jesus, we don't have connection to God. Without Jesus, um, we're not able to really reach our fullest potential. And and the other things kind of fall less important. Even though he would express beliefs that I disagree with, at the end of the day, love is his guide, and he would never. He's always in one-on-one kind of interactions, and if you ever met the man out in public, you would never know that he would necessarily hold different beliefs. He's a very, and that's the thing that always kept me. I never really became, the pendulum never swung all the way to like atheism or things like that, which it does for a lot of people who end up leaving their childhood faith, because there's anger and there's hurt and there's pain. And to my parents' credit, they always existed in love, and so I was able to kind of still find this place of peace with what I grew up with, and frustration with how the church represents themselves. So
What siblings do you have?
two older sisters, they 2 years older and 4 years older, and so I'm the youngest, and they're all very much still in the faith, and still all very they all still live out here in the Midwest, and married with kids and doing the traditional thing in a lot of ways.
So, as the only boy, and the pastor's son, how did that influence your teenage development? I mean, I imagine it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I felt a call to ministry at a pretty young age. In fourth grade, I said I wanted to be a missionary, and gave a speech in class on that, and it was always the principal part of my identity. I mean, I was Christian before I was anything else, and looking back on that, a lot of that is because I didn't know who I was, and so I relied on these external things. I relied on Christianity. I relied on um, sports and musicals and band and these other things to kind of fill my time and be my identity because I was so confused and disconnected about who I was. But I thought like if I keep doing it, if I keep kind of playing the role, if I keep like saying the right things and doing the right things, that this is all going to like work out. Like this has got to be just a part of the process. And so yeah, I mean, I gave sermons. I think I gave my first sermon when I was 13. Um, I led my senior year. My youth pastor actually had a stroke during Sunday school and ended up passing away a couple of weeks later. And that happened in October. And the rest of that year, I led the youth group because we weren't able to find another youth pastor. So I kind of stepped into that role of leadership. And so it was kind of I mean, I led Bible studies at lunch in my school. I would pray before my sporting events and have people join me. And I mean, it was who I was known to be. I mean, I was Christian, and I really, I mean, I loved that identity at the time. Um, and it wasn't really until much later in life that I was able to really unpack all of the barriers. Because I mean, I struggled a lot with depression. I actually attempted suicide when I was 16, and it was a
Why?
very like, you know, depression. I mean, I was so I really looking back on it now, I believe it was related to my misunderstanding of my gender, being non-binary, trying to live as a boy, growing into a man. There was lots of disconnect, and I didn't like myself very much. I didn't like aspects of my who I was, and I kind of believed that nobody else did either. I believed that everybody was kind of like being fake, and that if I died, nobody would miss me.
Say more about that because we know there's a big increase in suicidal ideation, anxiety, depression among youth. So, uh, would it be non-binary? Are you sexually attracted to both genders? It doesn't like really matter, or how did that express in terms of who you were attracted to as a teen?
So as a teen, I knew I was attracted to women, and the rest of it I just thought was, you know, I didn't have to worry about it because it was like I didn't even know. I didn't honestly, truly didn't understand the LGBTQ spectrum growing up. Like I believed so fiercely in this binary system that God created that like it was man, woman. Everything else outside of that was just like
Didn't
I was
exist.
kind of taught not God's best. Like it was out there, but it's not God's best. Like I wouldn't even consider it. But I did not know. Not I didn't know really gender identity was a thing. Like I mean, of course, I'd heard of trans individuals, but I mean, I'd never outside of like movies or things like that. I'd never really seen anyone or had experience with anybody. Didn't really know anybody who was out on the spectrum in my small little farming community. And so, I mean, my interest, I was always very comfortable uh, with men, and it wasn't until my kind of like fantasy life grew that I realized like I have things that like are my other guy friends don't have. So I've always been very open with discussing sexuality. Ironically, it was something that I thought was important to talk about, even though I didn't even know how to talk about it. And so I would have conversations with my teenage friends about masturbation and about you know pornography or things like that, kind of out of this curiosity and out of a desire of like we need to be better, and because I believed that that was also sinful. So it was a weird kind of mix there, but for the most part, I'm attracted to the feminine more often than not, and so or a balance between the feminine and masculine. So I consider myself queer, and at this point now I realize that like you know that attraction is different, but I still primarily seem to be drawn towards either women who have a balance of the feminine mask, especially bisexual women and or bisexual men um, who have a again that good balance in their connection to the feminine and the masculine, and trans individuals. That's definitely where my kind of attraction tends to fall.
Well, I'm confused because you were the model teenage person in terms of
Mhm.
how you were the athlete, you were the youth leader, and so you had a lot of social approval, you felt like you
Sure.
were on target. Where did the depression come from? I'm
So
not a
that so that's what the identity piece. That's all I can figure. It baffled me for years because I after it was, yeah, it wasn't really honestly until this past year of realizing my non-binary identity that I've just everything has made more sense. I believe that I was depressed because I didn't know who I was. I was trying to be this person, this boy, and growing into a man that lived a certain way and expressed a certain way and followed certain ideals and beliefs, and all of those things weren't true. And it was, and I believe this whole time, my true, my self-conscious or my subconscious knew this the whole time and has been trying to express it and find ways to show it. And it wasn't until I got into the rave dance festival music scene that I was able to start expressing myself uh, in ways that like I never even tried, and it wasn't even meant to be a gender expression as much as like, oh, you know what? I think it'd be fun to paint my fingernails. I'm going to do that. I think it'd be fun to wear a skirt. I'm going to do that. I think it'd be fun to do my makeup. I'm going to do that. Like I'm going to start doing more of these feminine things, and the more that I'm out in that environment, the more my feminine came out, and the more alive I felt, and finally was able to sit down with that more and more and break that down and realize that like if I'm just queer every day, I don't have to go to these environments all the time to be queer. Like, I can be me all the time. And
So queer to you means being androgynous or bisexual?
so queer, yeah, queer. I use queer because I used to say I was bisexual before I realized my non-binary identity, but bisexual doesn't. I mean, I don't really believe in the binary, so I like to break that down now. And I think queer is just a more all-encompassing term for me. Not that I'm not. I have no problem with people who use the term bisexual or anything like that by any means, but um, yeah, I use queer just as an overarching kind of term. It's just easier than saying like I'm non-binary and I'm attracted to the feminine and like it's like so
So have you had intimate relationships with men?
not really. Nope, it's because it's there's only been a few that I've been attracted to and drawn to. And the unique thing about our culture is the depth at which homophobia exists. And I think there is a large subsect of the male population who do have bisexual leanings, who are uncomfortable with expressing that. And so I've had plenty of intimate moments with men. Um, they have not led to sexual moments necessarily. I mean, outside of kissing or things like that. Um, but um, but yeah, it's also it's not something. It's a newer place for me, and it's not a place that I honestly have as much comfortability with. You know, going out into the gay dating scene, for instance, is not a place that I have found kind of my like rhythm with because it's somewhat of a more masculine environment, and there's a little bit more of like the upfront and like um not for lack of a better term, like there's like an aggressiveness to it at times. Um and it's just not an area that I flow into very easily. I'm much more I tend to lean more towards my feminine. And so I have found far more connection with actually lesbians and bisexual women more often than not. That's where I tend to find my comfortability.
You know, I keep thinking of Sandra Bem's studies on androgyny, where she found that the healthiest individuals can flexibly shift from their
Mm-hmm.
masculine or instrumental, feminine or nurturant sides. And if you're
Sure,
only operating in one pole, that you don't have the kind of options or flexibility. So
absolutely.
you're like the wave of the future that in being androgynous.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the plight of a lot of the non-binary individuals. It's like there's this, we have a unique place in this world, I believe. And you know, I'm not near as well spoken as like Alok. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Alok, but Alok is this brilliant human who is out there, poet and is just such a powerhouse in the community, and
How do you
is
spell it?
trying to ALOK,
Oh,
and trying that, and that's the goal, trying to break down this notion of like it has to be one or the other or this other thing. Like th you shouldn't even have to say I'm boy, girl, man, woman. Like, why does that matter? Why can't we exist in this world as human, as Matty, as and let the world, and as I get to know you, you get to know who I am and how I express and what I want to be and how, what sides of myself. Because I think all of us, whether or not, no matter where you fall on the spectrum, everybody has a feminine and masculine in them,
for
and
sure.
everybody should be pushing to learn more about the side that they don't know as much. And
Carl
there's
Jung
fear with that.
Carl Jung named the masculine side in women the animus and the feminine side in men the anima, and said how important they are in our relationship. So Carl Jung
Absolutely.
knew that a long time ago.
Yep.
So when you were 16, did your parents know that you
No,
tried to commit suicide?
nobody did. Nobody. I didn't tell anybody for probably 2 years. It was it was a quiet. I tried to flip my car while I was driving home one day, and the car just skidded to a stop, and I had a um, very movie moment, screaming at the sky in the middle of a field. After that, and then from that day forward, I just decided that, what, I'm going to be different. I'm going to make a change. And I put a sign on my door that said, "Today's going to be a great day." I would give myself positive affirmations in the mirror, and I just allowed that to start helping me grow a little bit. And it wasn't until I finally got into counseling as I got older and was able to really work on those core issues, because I was continuing to deal with some of the cyclical negative thought spirals. I just never let it get down to that point again.
Was there some kind of precipitating event that was that I'm going to flip my car, or this came out of the
You know,
book?
I it sounds so pedestrian or simple, but that day I had money that was stolen out of my locker. I lost my tennis match, and I think I got into a fight maybe with my girlfriend or something. Something weird happened, and at the end of that day, I was just like, "I'm good. I'm done." I've been thinking about this for months. I've been contemplating the different ways that I could do it, to because I didn't want anybody to know. That was my intention with flipping the car, was it would just look like a freak car accident. Nobody would have to know that it, because I knew that the suicide would weigh on my family, as my mother especially, and so even though this would be tragic, it at least wouldn't seem intentional. Um, and so that was my thought with it. But yeah, it didn't take. I was it had been several months, going really on probably a year or more, that I was in this headspace and contemplating, and thankfully I drove a very old vehicle that didn't have much speed, and had no. I don't think it's possible to flip that vehicle.
Um, Before we leave adolescence, you have a daughter?
I do have three. I have three daughters. My ex and I, we were foster parents, and we adopted teenagers through the foster system. So I
Wow.
met my oldest daughter when she was 16. I met my youngest daughter when she was 14.
So in terms of raising them, girls are more likely to be anxious and depressed. Boys are
Mm.
more likely to commit suicide. What do you see in terms of the like a lot of people blame social media for girls
Mhm.
comparing their bodies with other people and their
Yeah.
popularity, and more affected by that than boys who are doing more video games. What do you see in terms of your daughters?
It's a very unique story, because I mean, my two oldest daughters are were born in Mexico, and my youngest daughter was born in a refugee camp in Nepal, and so
Wow.
they have the whole other cultural component that comes into play. Um, I find it interesting, honestly, to think that there's, not that I don't believe that there's a rise in the anxiety and depression, as much as, like, I mean, I all my life, almost nearly every woman, it seems like, in my life has had some level of anxiety or depression, um, at some point in their life. And many of that, I mean, a huge chunk of that, especially in the church. And that's one of those, the church gives some really, I think, damning messages that aren't intentional, but that are interpreted into worthlessness.
Like the man
And
should be the head of the family.
some of that, but even just that, like there's this very standard belief of like I'm not worthy. It's only with Jesus that I'm worthy. And the intentionality is to say that I need Jesus, not that I'm not worth anything. However, I think the interpretation becomes I'm not worth anything, especially
Oh,
if you make mistakes.
oh,
That worth continues to diminish. And and again, I don't think it's the intention. And I think, when you actually look at the the point of scripture, it's Jesus kind of trying to break that down better and saying, like, no, you have value. You have value. And so it's interesting that I think what we're seeing more is maybe a more of a comfortability with expressing those needs. I think previous generations, I was just having this kind of conversation with my parents and um, my dad's siblings and their spouses about the rise of mental health, and my dad saying things like, "We didn't have mental health problems in my day," and it's like I just don't believe that. I mean, I think, and I've seen plenty of parents of that generation who have plenty of mental health problems, but there's not a comfortability with addressing them. There's a tamping down of feelings. There's a avoidance. There's um, distractions, and people that exist, what I believe, live in a muted state and don't really get to experience the fullness of this life because it requires a little bit more work and engagement. And I think now there's a much larger comfortability with counseling, with understanding mental health, and so I think maybe we're seeing more of a more of an expression at an earlier age. I think social media certainly has its significant issues. Um, I mean, I think that is 100% true that um, it is too easy to say whatever you want through a screen, and and people interpret those messages so fiercely, and and internalize those messages so fiercely. It's like, and so yeah, I definitely think that there's some plenty of reason to be concerned about that. I would love to see would love to see our a push to have better communication, better social awareness kind of education, better social emotional understanding. I would love to see more of that growth because I think that's where we're really going to start seeing the decline. Is people aren't, when I was a kid, I was forced into conflict resolution situations because we were out playing at playgrounds and we were out, you know, not there were no parents around and we were having to like figure our stuff out on our own. And kids of this generation do not have that freedom and are constantly being kind of, I mean, in some ways, over parented. And so I think we're going to see a lack of those social emotional skills developing and the emotional IQ not really being there potentially or taking longer to get there. That's my more of my fear. Um, my daughters, they're again they're unique because they were forced into some situations where they had to be on their own more due to abuse and neglect and traumas and those kinds of things. So they were kind of thrust into some situations where they had to grow up faster, sadly. And my, certainly there's plenty there's my oldest has struggled with plenty of things emotionally, like had has used medication and that kind of stuff at times, and but so yeah, so I mean I don't know that I fully answered your question there, but that was kind of my rambling of thoughts there.
Yeah, what you said was that you don't think necessarily that this is a new phenomenon. It's always existed. We're just more have more permission to talk about it. Um, and then, what I always think about is Jesus was a feminist. He had
Sure,
women travel with him, bear
absolutely.
witness. He said, Mary hath chosen the better part, not Martha being in the kitchen, Mary
Hmm.
talking theology with him. They were
Yep.
that last there at the crucifixion, first there at the resurrection. So
Right.
he didn't say one sexist thing ever.
Right. Right.
But it's so amazing that the Southern Baptists can say, well, but we can't have women as
Right.
pastors.
right, and such a misinterpretation because there were cultural things that were expressed more so by Paul,
Paul.
uh, and but even Paul's messages are completely misinterpreted. Paul's not Paul is talking about the culture that we're in, not the belief or not the foundational understanding of humanity.
Yeah. And he said that we don't want people to think Christians are people of bad
Right.
morals or something. We're trying
That's the
to
thing.
spread the church.
The church, I mean, the original church was subservient in like every way. I mean, they were anti-culture and were trying to be a be something different in this world. And it wasn't until Constantine came to power in around 300 that, and then made Christianity the national religion, that everything changed, in my opinion.
Yeah, right. So did you go away from home to go to college?
I did. Yep. Yep. But not, I went to a very safe space. I mean, I went to the school that my sisters went to, that all of my family had gone to. Um, and so, like, it was a space that I really knew in a lot of ways. I didn't really take that risk of stepping out. I wanted to. I thought that I was going to. I applied to a couple of schools. That would have been a jump, but at the end of the day, I just went with what was safe.
And how did that uh, support or detract from your mental health and feeling depressed?
So by that point, I'd worked through a lot of this stuff. I wasn't really down in the dumps all the time by my senior year. I was living pretty large. However, the death of my youth pastor started to get me to ask different questions. And so at that point, I started. That was the beginning of the deconstruction of the faith that I grew up believing. And it was going into college. I majored in Bible and religion, and and so like I started to study the Bible academically, started to understand more of the culture, which thrust me into new conversations and new questions. And the more questions that I asked, the better I felt. The more that I felt like this is what I'm supposed to be doing, the more at peace I felt. Um, and I've always had this thirst for understanding other people's perspectives and views, and wanting to really just dive into the whys of this world. And and so that all really started in college. I started having these conversations with people who had asked questions before me, um, and it's the funny thing is all those people who were influential in that time, I've gone much further past. Most of them are still very much rooted in their Christian faith, um, and and so yeah, it was a really liberating time in a lot of ways. I ended up meeting my uh, first wife, or I guess only wife, when we were 18, and we had got married during college when we were 21. And a lot of that was because of religion. And, you know, we were virgins. And so we were ready to not be virgins. And the only way to do that guilt free was to be married. And so we kind of pushed, I think, the timetable on what was reasonable. Neither one, I definitely didn't know who I was. And so that is what eventually led to, I think, our divorce. Eventually, is as we grew up into who we knew ourselves to be, we realized how different we were, and what, especially how different we wanted to be to live this life. We're still very close. I'm actually house sitting at her house this week and dog sitting for her, while her and her partner are out on a road trip here. So we're definitely in a great space. But yeah, I mean, it led to. It's a weird thing. I look back on my life, and it's hard. I don't know what piece I would take out, because all of it has led me into this place, into this person that I've become. And sure, it'd be great to I found that out when I was younger, but there was so much I had to work through, and deconstruct, and get past the repression in order to get to this point. So I kind of required all of those previous experiences, I believe.
Yeah, so the depression when you were a teen, it wasn't just gender, it was feeling like constrained in terms of questioning the religious practices and stuff. It was like
Probably,
put in
yeah,
a
yeah,
box.
yeah, yeah, yep.
Um, and then in terms of what you've seen traveling around and your daughter's friends and stuff, people are talking about a boy crisis, that
Hmm.
boys aren't likely to, as girls to around the world, to go to college. They are stay in their parents' basement rather while the girls are out working or whatever.
Hmm.
That something happened to boys. And Bill Maher did a piece where he said to women, you know, I really feel sorry for you. Men are so inept. And he did a whole spoof about game and that telling men how to behave properly as
Hmm.
adult males. So
Hmm.
something's going on that where boys are are restricted or inhibited or something's not developing right. Do you have any thoughts or observations about
Sure.
that
Yeah.
as a former boy?
Yeah, I wonder how much of it is goes back to that um those deep feelings of homophobia throughout the world, those deep feelings of
Oh,
not being able to of men not really being comfortable with the feminine. I think there's and it's been I've been doing a lot of thinking about this here recently because I actually think it's when we look at the generations of men in this last century coming out of World War I and World War II, the men who survived and came back with mental health intact were the masculine, I believe. The people who shut off their feminine. Because if you
me
had feminine in that time frame, I mean the atrocities that they were witnessing and experiencing and perpetuating, I don't know how in the world you could experience those events and come back and live a quote unquote normal life.
interesting.
And I think a lot of the trauma and a lot of the people, or a lot of the collapse, or the men who were seen as weak in that time frame, were men who had more of a connection to their feminine, more connection to their emotional side, and so then we have this generation of men. My grandparents' generation, who are raising my parents' generation, very much in those strong gendered roles because that's more of that balanced living because that was what they had to do. And so they were, and there's always been this acceptance of women kind of like women in the sexuality, like lesbianism is not, there isn't really the same level of homophobia in regards to lesbianism as there is towards gay men for whatever reason. And so women are allowed to express and explore their sexuality in ways. I mean, that's actually celebrated. The bisexual woman is seen as this like unicorn, this special person in the world. And so but so you have this generation now, I think, where there's still a lot of men who are very uncomfortable with their feminine and with understanding what that means because it is still the patriarchy so strongly has for generations viewed women as less than, and men are not okay with that. And so I think that's where there's that kind of like, even if it's not being spoken, there is those there underlying tones of of that throughout our culture that I think potentially are leading to this point. And beyond that, men found so much of their identity for I mean, just generations. Men found their identity in like being able to take care of a woman, right? Like that was this
Provider.
thing, and women don't need that anymore. They just don't. This culture, you can be an independent woman and live your fullest life, never having to settle for any kind of relationship. And so men have lost a little bit of that power dynamic, that this importance in the world, and um, men's ego is weak. And so you take away this this thing, this purpose in the world, and they haven't found that new purpose yet, even though like there's so much greater purpose out there. But I think there's a lot of that, and then that's worldwide. I mean, the patriarchy is spread worldwide. I talk a lot. I mean, I can mostly talk about American culture, but you see misogyny all throughout, and some cultures certainly more fiercely than others. And so, but I think you see rising right all worldwide. You see just as much rising feminism throughout the world. Women are finding their power. Women are finding their voice, and this is where the age of social media and internet is beautiful. Is that is allowing the people's voice who weren't heard before are now being heard. you
So,
can get your
so the
voice out there.
idea is if I'm a teenage boy, I'm not needed to be a provider, so I'm going to lose myself in my video games and give up.
Potentially. I don't know. I mean, I think that's just a question that I have. I think there's a lot of yeah, there's a lot of this just this when you don't meet the expectations, what else do you do? And yeah, I don't know. Perhaps.
Hmm. Um, I wonder what role like the MAGA movement and
Oof.
the all the attention on Trump being such a chauvinist pig. I wonder if that kind of influences boys to think, well, it's not cool to be a man.
Maybe. I mean, I think I think part of what we're seeing as well is, um, oh, I just lost my train of thought.
In
Yeah,
terms
I
of
mean,
boys.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think the misogynist messages are it's just so sad how much of that still exists. Um,
Maybe it's a
and I think,
reaction, uh, when as things change, there's a counter movement of
mhm.
pendulum
Well,
swinging.
I think I also wonder how much of this is an actual crisis, and how much of this is more of a fear based of men losing their power, and they're like, what's this next generation going to do? Like like women are rising because I mean you still look at the workforce is still not balanced at all. So this boys crisis is not you're not seeing it play out when it comes to getting jobs or when it comes to getting equal pay and things like that. Men are still getting hired in positions above women, and men are still getting paid more for less qualifications. So it's like what I don't know that I see the results of this crisis yet, outside of perhaps the increased suicide rate. Um, but I don't know. I mean, I think so. I have questions. I don't know that we really will know if there's a crisis for I don't know another 10, 20 years.
Oh, interesting. Um, so what would you say to a teen who feels I'm non-binary, I don't identify with just being male or just being female? Anything you would say to them since you only were allowed to discover yours a year ago?
Yeah, I think asking questions is always the best thing to do. What does that mean to you? What does how why is that important to you? What is it about? How do you want to express that? All those kinds of questions I find interesting. Um, as far as I mean, I would certainly be an encourager. I mean, I think I would, and I would talk to them about the freedom that comes in knowing, um, and the peace. Even though I was just having this conversation with my mother actually this last weekend, and because it's not something that she understands, and so in her belief, this is more of a choice that I'm making. And my question back was, why would I choose this? Why would I choose to live this somewhat harder existence of constantly having to explain myself, about constantly having to tell people why I'm wearing makeup or why my fingernails are painted or why I'm wearing a skirt or why um, maybe I have feminine characteristics or things like that, like why these things are important to me. Why do I still have a beard? Those guys like I'm like, well, I like the mix of masculine and feminine. But it's just there's this constant I'm constantly having to tell people um, who I am, and that can be an exhausting thing. So I'm like, why would I choose this? like, but again, there's even with all of that, like my inner peace is unlike anything I felt. I've never felt this centered, this full, this alive, just with been being with myself than ever before. I mean, the first 30 plus years of my life were I did not want to be alone. I did not like when I was by myself, and I had a very hard time with those individual moments because of where my thoughts would go. That's where some of my I was so uncomfortable with who I was. I liked parts of myself, but I only really liked myself when I was around other people. Um, because I do have good social skills and I am loving and engaging, and so I got all of this validation all the time because I couldn't give it to myself.
And
I
so
relied on external validation.
the lack of comfort was that you hadn't expressed the feminine part of yourself in a way that was natural to you.
I believe so. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what makes the most sense because I could not figure it out. I mean, I was in counseling for years trying to like unpack what was going on with me because I'm like, this doesn't make sense. I grew up in a loving home, a supportive household. Like I had all of these things. Like how in the world did I develop depression? Like I was top in my class. I was um, athletic. I had musical abilities. I had like all of the boxes were checked. I was like, I should be happy as can be. I should be the happiest kid out there. And at times I certainly was happy, but my
So
goodness, there
what
was this
tack
inner
did the
turmoil.
therapist take?
I mean, depends. I mean, there was a lot. It took me a long time really to find a therapist that I connected with. Um, and there's so many. Again, there was so much when I was still married. So much of it was focused on the failing marriage, and really honestly coming into my own understanding of my sexuality. That was happening back at the end of my marriage. And so I found that piece out well before I started to dip into the gender. It still took me again. It took me several years. I mean, I because I also didn't realize. I think I kind of made this comment I think a little earlier, but I think people undersell what's possible in this life of how they can feel. People exist, I believe, in kind of this lower level of happiness a lot of times because they've checked all the boxes. They got married, they had the kids, they got the house, they've got the good job, the retirement. Like, yeah, I'm happy, life's good. But when you actually like sit down, I'm like, okay, well, where's your passion? Like, what is it that's like makes your soul come alive? Right? Like, there's oftentimes this disconnect where it's like, well, I love my kids, I love being a parent. It's like great. Some people's passion is being parent, not everybody's. Like that doesn't make you come fully alive. There's this like delayed gratification that exists in this world of like, well, when I retire, I'm going to take that trip or I'm going to do that thing or I'm going to, but right now I got to, this is life is like about, checking these boxes. I'm good. And what I want to like push into with people is and help them to explore more is what's possible in this life. It goes far beyond checking those boxes. I mean, you can live, there's been a lot of my life that I haven't checked those boxes. My financial situation has been crazy. I've like done some weird things with my living situations and things like that, that from the outside looking in would be like, oh, that person is not, they're spiraling, but I'm living the fullest life I've ever lived. Because it's an internal understanding, um, and and that's where I believe, we can get to when we actually do the work of connecting with ourselves and understanding um, who we are and what unique things we offer to the world, and then doing it, showing it, not selling ourselves short.
Could you say a word about your tattoos, what they symbolize to you?
Sure. So this side, all of these on this side of my body are all represent different life themes, or like mantras. So this one's actually I got when I was still very much religious, but it's in Hebrew. It says "Seek God and live," um, and I still believe that because I believe that God is love, is loving energy. So for me, it's more about seek love and live. Um, this is a it's the Celtic tree, which represents kind of the interconnectedness of life and the beginning and end, and then it's a sign for gender equality, male, female, and trans.
Ah,
Um, yeah, the cool thing about this tattoo for me is I got this a long time ago, well before I had any indication of me being a part of the trans umbrella. So, again, my subconscious knew some things that I did not. Um, this one is a cairn, and so that represents kind of the um, marking the path, paying attention to people who have gone before you, and leaving markers for those coming behind. Um, this one appears the my kind of pursuit in this life of improving the accessibility of our world, and this one is it's a broken cross, and it looks like a stone, represents kind of the what I grew up believing was so solid and firm has broken. It's gray to represent the grayness of the world. And the cool thing about this one is I actually found this symbol. I didn't get a tattoo, but when I found it, I was using it as a sign for resurrection and kind of this desire for the church to change, break this symbol that has been used for to support all of the atrocities throughout the world. Um, so still definitely represents that. Um, Back here, this is the Nepali word for peace. And again, just that pursuit and kind of paying respect to my daughter. See, this one here is the Pura Vida. It's the Costa Rican saying. It's their like pure life.
Yeah.
Um, and it's their kind of complete optimism. This one is that pursuit of my to continue to ask questions and understand the whys of the world. The more questions I ask, the more illuminated my understanding becomes. Got this one here is the cog is from a Fleet Foxes song that represents. It says, "I was raised up believing I was somehow unique, like a snowflake, distinct in each way you can see. But after some thinking, I say I'd rather be a functioning cog in some great machinery serving something beyond me." So again, kind of deals with my desire to be a part of something bigger. It's the Greek word for community, koinonia. And then the Celtic knot is originally a pagan symbol, represents earth, body, and spirit. And it also was adopted by Christianity, represent the Trinity. But for me, I find it more engaging that the triangle represents is a symbol for adoption, for parent, birth parent, adoptive parent, and child. And so I like the interconnectedness of all of those. And I have three daughters, and so kind of represents all of that. This one is hope. It kind of deals with the things that I grew up believing. I've kind of
Uh-oh.
from his faith.
Wait. Okay, we're back again.
So, you got me?
Yeah.
I don't know why the Wi-Fi is being so weird here.
So we were on hope.
Okay, so yeah, so this one it's the branch, the leaves kind of are deal with like the hope that I grew up believing has kind of faded away, but I've renewed hope in the natural world. And then this one is one of my favorites for sure. This one is I don't know if you can fully see it, but it's a heart that's overflowing. And this
Oh,
represents kind of freedom in life, these moments in life where I've been fully alive. A lot of that's happened in nature. And Hawaii was a place that really changed my life in a lot of ways. So it's a very Hawaii-esque kind of tattoo, but it also represents my belief in freedom of love. I don't believe that our love. I don't believe our love is finite. I believe we have limitless amounts. Our only limitation is time. So I'm a relationship anarchist and believe in, yeah, I tend to be more non-monogamous. And then this is my newest one. Um, it's backwards on the screen, but it's the Swedish word lagom. And it represents, it means it's their kind of like, uh, pursuit to live a balanced life, enjoy all the things in this world, but do it in moderation. Um, and so it's my kind of reminder every day of like, am I, because part of my story has been I've had a little bit too much fun maybe in the last few years here of going to too many festivals and kind of like being out all the time and realizing that to do all of the other things that I want to do in this world, I need to be balanced in it. So, um, yeah, so it's that reminder to continue to be balanced. So yeah, those are a lot of them. I've got a big one over here as well that tells the story of my divorce. Going onto my back is a very peaceful, predictable space. Up here, there's a forked river, and that's the point of the divorce. And then coming down my arm represents kind of the future of the unknown, adventure, fear of what was coming. Um, the rest of this arm is going to kind of tell the rest of my story over these last few years. So yeah.
where do you guess that it will go? The future.
Oh, so the story in the future is going to be a fun one. I've got lots of big dreams. I see me as being very involved in the um, in the queer community. I think a big part of what I'm going to do is dealing with reconciliation between the church and the queer community, because I believe, even though I don't necessarily cling to Christianity in the same ways anymore, a lot of the queer community has been hurt by the church, and they still love their faith, they still love their church. So helping kind of mend some of those fences and help people continue to push beyond their boundaries of understanding, because I think it's possible we can all live in this in more of a harmonious state and still hold those same beliefs that they hold. I don't believe that being LGBTQ affirming negates anything else in the faith. Um, so I see that being a part of it. I'm starting a business as a relationship and sex coach, specializing in work with people who are exploring non-traditional relationship structures, and then kind of the niche side is working with individuals who have disabilities, or with people who have medical diagnoses that impact their ability to connect to their sexuality, or connect, or impact their ability of their to connect to their in the relationship to maintain the intimacy. So helping people continue to work through that and find the adaptable options, um, and work on the education side there a lot of trying to. I'd love to do workshops and um, do more like meta education kind of stuff in that realm. So yeah,
So it sounds like you are supportive of people who want polyandrous relationships.
yeah. Well, I mean, kind of. So polyamory for sure. Polyandry. Um, let's see what polyandry is. That the polygamy? That's the one that I'm not.
Oh,
Polygamy
that's
tends to have the religious kind of connotations to it.
oh wait,
Um,
polyamorous, not poly, because poly, but that means having many husbands. So forget that
Yes,
one.
yeah. I was like, I think that's like, yeah, polyamory, non-monogamy is kind of more of the overarching term, and that's where like relationship anarchy for me is where I find more of the beauty. Relationship anarchy just says like, let's break down all of the heteronormative assumptions around relating and just allow everything to be a choice. So I'm not anti-monogamy or anything like that. Like, I think but it should be something that everybody chooses consciously together. And I believe that it's dynamic. No decision is ever has to be this like rooted thing. Life changes, people change, situations change. So allow yourself to continue to engage in conversation with your partners, and again, live the fullest life that you can live.
So how does one deal with jealousy? It's hard to
Sure.
see your partner that you love have sex with someone else.
Yeah, well, the reality jealousy is just highlighting insecurity, insecurity of self or insecurity of the relationship. That's what I believe. That's all it is. So it's an opportunity to grow and find new depth, because there's fear. People have fear that somebody's going to meet somebody who's better, or somebody's going to have more fun with somebody else. That's all insecurity. That's all rooted in this notion that like I'm not enough really, or that I don't trust that you think I'm enough. But what you find oftentimes when people are ethical and when people are being honest and are truly engaging from a loving space in this, what you find is compersion, which is the antithesis to jealousy. It is a overflowing feeling of love for your partner as they experience new connections. That's what you again when you come to this from a secure place. The problem is a lot of people start opening up the relationship because it's failing, because it's struggling, because we're not connecting right. So maybe we add other people in, and that's not really a recipe for success, in my opinion. I think this only really comes to beauty when you are connected and full, and you decide this together that this is something else we also want to do.
If people want to get in touch with you and take advantage of your services, do you have a
Mhm.
website or how can they?
So yeah, it's still growing. I mean, Instagram is definitely the best way. I mean, you can find me at wanderlust underscore Matty, or at Weird Life Coach
Wanderlust underscore what?
Matty.
Matty?
Y. Yep, and that's Wander as in WANDER as opposed to Wonder.
Yeah, W. And then
Yep,
the other one is
Weird Life Coach. Yeah, because I find the fun thing about the word weird. I mean, I've always said celebrate your weird, live your weird loud, those kinds of things. And the etymology of the word weird is beautiful. It comes from Old English and it means to find one's destiny.
Oh,
Because they used it to describe witches and truthsayers and things like that. So, I mean, and the purest definition of the word, the weirder you are, the closer you are to your destiny.
and we should say that you're an occupational therapist, so you have
Yes. Yeah.
academic training.
Yes. I've got my master's in that, and I've had a wide variety of experiences. And I love OT. I mean, OT, again, the heart of occupational therapy is helping people experience the fullest of this life, regardless of ability. That's
Right.
kind of the core message of OT. So,
Okay. Um, Anything that we've left out? I'm sure there's something, but anything that comes to mind that, especially in terms of speaking to teens?
um, again, I think asking questions. I think there's this idea and there's a little bit of this belief in culture that um, children and teens they're too young to be making some of these decisions, but they're the purest ones. I mean, they're the ones who are least impacted by the years and years um, of the heteronormative kind of messages. Especially the younger. I mean, when you have a 6 year old coming to you and saying, "I don't feel like a boy," or "I don't feel like a girl," I feel like, or maybe I feel like I'm both. Like that's something that I think we should take notice of, not try to like restrict or um, confine them, because there's a purity in that expression. They are just trying to say, "Here's what I am." And again, allow for people to change. Allow for somebody to say one thing and then maybe 2 years later they can say something else, and that's okay. This idea that we are fixed and we have
Right.
to be this one thing our whole lives doesn't make any sense. Gender expression is something that can be fluid. There may be times in your life when you may find yourself on one side or another, or um, your sexuality can certainly ebb and flow and change and grow and whatever. I mean, there's so many factors that play into our understanding of who we are. So allow people to change, allow people to be who they want to be.
Great. Thank you.